Welcome to the Dungeons and Dragons episode you all requested. For those of you who haven't seen me before, my name is Bente, and I'm coming to you from Vesterålen in northern Norway. And normally I talk about knitting and yarn. And for those of you who are familiar with me and my circumstance, the wobbling is still because of the cat. You're used to that by now. I have someone with me today, and he can introduce himself.
Yes, my name is Tor, and I am Bente's husband, and also the DM for her current ongoing campaign. And I think we get more...
Say what his t-shirt says. The t-shirt is a gift from Sue, Crafty Knitter 7. And I wanted him to wear that for this.
Now the problem with this one is that I never smile. I have a constant resting bitch face, so you never know with me.
You and me both. The first thing I'm going to say is a disclaimer, because we're sort of new to Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk a bit more about that afterwards. But if you're looking for tutorials, if you want to know more about the rules and how to play Dungeons and Dragons, you should go elsewhere, because we're only going to talk about our experiences and our current campaign. So you know. So we should start with how I, in my late 50s, ended up playing Dungeons and Dragons and how we ended up doing it. I'm not sure, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons before you met me?
No, I played a lot of RPGs, but never Dungeons and Dragons. But I never played tabletop. I only played RPGs on my trusted computers, with Might and Magic being the main series of RPGs. More modern RPGs like Guild Wars is also something I've spent too many hours on. So my experience is first of all with the game engines emulating the original Dungeons and Dragons match engines.
So this sort of started when my oldest son moved away to Tromsø to go to university, and he rather quickly ended up in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And he talked to me about this, and I thought it sounded like a lot of fun, and I mentioned this to one of my colleagues at work, and she told me a few days later, we're going to start a new campaign. Do you and your husband want to join us? And so we started from scratch, but fortunately, we were not the only new players. So that's where we started playing. And Isak actually DM'd for us a couple of times when he came home to visit. But this whole thing didn't take off until we discovered Critical Role. I started watching Campaign 3, Episode 1, and I quickly figured this probably should interest hubby as well. I think we started Campaign 2 from Episode 1. I think that was the first thing we watched together.
It's the first campaign that we completed. We may have watched parts of Campaign 1 indirectly when your son visited us, because I do remember seeing some tabletop RPG on YouTube before we started to get really into Critical Role. So we may have seen some of it at an earlier stage, but
but we started by watching the entirety of Campaign 2. And we did Voxmachina, Campaign 1. And then in between this, I think we watched Campaign 3 up until the point where we were at the same point as they were live, to put it like that. So we had to wait a week for the next episode. But we've seen Campaign 2, Mighty Nine, twice. We've seen Campaign 1, Voxmachina, twice. And we actually got Amazon Prime just to watch The Legend of Voxmachina, the animated series. So we're kind of, I think we can call ourselves critters. That's what they call the Critical Role fans. So And we were watching this, and during COVID, there were no live playing, and we don't know a lot of people here that play Dungeons and Dragons. And watching a lot of Critical Role, I really started feeling the urge to play myself. And that's when I started talking to Hobby about maybe we could try playing just the two of us. And that's when I bought him this for his birthday, Tal'Dorei Reborn. My son gave him the Dungeon Master Guide for the same birthday. And that's where we started. We have. I'm starting to go into our campaign. I can tell I'm going to do that. I think Hubby is the DM, so he can't spoil anything for me either because he knows a lot I don't know. I haven't read the entirety of this book because there are secrets in here that I'm not supposed to know. But the campaign he is running for me is based on Tal'Dorei. And Tal'Dorei is a continent on Exandria, and Exandria is Matthew Mercer, the DM in Critical Role. It's his world. Everything is thought. He has made everything up. That's in here. And so we started there, and Hubby has been. You can tell them what you based it on because you haven't only based it on Exandria.
No, it's more or less. I would say it's 50% homebrew, 50% the rules. So for those of you who are very stuck on the mechanics of the game and the lore, this is probably where you should leave us. But it is a lot of home brew. Some of the items that you run into and discover and also get are homebrew items, usually artifacts that may be based on the lore, or loosely so. For instance, a dagger that's quite similar to the one that Liam O'Brien's character Vax gets in the original campaign, but not quite the same. Not the same kind of attributes. So it is a lot of homebrew, which also is more or less what we did the first campaign we played that I DM'd. This is the second campaign that I DM'd.
But the first campaign we did, it was me and our youngest son.
And also 1 or 2 times with your oldest as well.
But that was not. I think that was the one you based on Might and Magic.
Yeah, based it on the PC game Might and Magic 6 from, I think it's 1998. It's way back in time. One of the first original 3D RPGs to be released. And it's a game I think I've played more than 10,000 hours on, so I know the entire game engine from scratch. So it was easier for me to adapt to a world that I already knew when I chose to create a campaign from scratch. So that's the origin story of the first campaign. But the second campaign is 50% homebrew, 50% Tal'Dorei. The part that is most Tal'Dorei is, of course, the maps and locations. And also, we do at times have guest visits from very, very famous NPCs.
That's the part. One thing I should say: if you're watching this because you're a subscriber to my channel and you haven't played any RPGs and you don't know who Critical Role is, I should just do a quick introduction. Critical Role is a group of voice actors that play Dungeons and Dragons on live streams. It's just what it sounds like. They sit around the table playing Dungeons and Dragons. And one campaign is about 500 hours of entertainment. And
more than that.
Yeah, every episode is about 4 to 5 hours. That's the average length on the session for normal Dungeons and Dragons as well. And and that's what Critical Role is. So when we are talking about famous NPCs, that's characters that's the short for non-player
Player.
character, and that's Matthew Mercer voices and controls those in Critical Role, and Hubby voices and controls those in our campaign. And
But we also used the PCs from campaign 1 as NPCs in our campaign.
yeah, so I have met characters from campaign 1, campaign 3, and none from campaign 2. It's really logical, really, because campaign 2 happens on a different continent, and both campaign 1 and 3 of Critical Role have more. No, wait a minute. Campaign 3 is in Marquette, but that's a different continent, but they have had run-ins with characters from campaign 1 as well. And when it comes to play, it might, for two of you who have played Dungeons and Dragons, being just the two of us, we actually solved that sort of, because a party of 1, that's no fun. But Hobby actually has a PC as well, but we can talk about our characters perhaps, because that's we can tell you a bit about the characters. My character, her name is Brianna Stormwind, and she's a half-orc, and she started out as a fighter, but she has started taking levels in Paladin, so she's now what's called a multi-class Paladin fighter. And I think I'm a total of level 10, 9 or 10. And hobbies, PC, can you tell us about her?
Yeah, she's called Prospero the Void. I cannot go too much into her backstory because that will reveal things.
Brianna doesn't know it yet either, so I'm not allowed to know.
But what Brian knows about Val is that she is on the run from some kind of...
Race or class? Start with the basics.
The race is a tiefling, and she is a druid, but she also has levels in cleric, which is a rather strange combination, but it ties up with her backstory to a certain extent. She is on the run, more or less, from higher power, which is very closely connected to one of the main characters in campaign 1. And that also, to a certain extent, goes a long way to explain some of her actions. She wild shapes a lot. She more or less uses wild shape, which is a D&D spell.
Yeah.
She's
a bird a lot of the time.
Yeah, she uses it as a stealth and also escape mechanism in the game. Because she's like infamous in certain circles, and there are bounty hunters on her tail, to say the very least.
And Valspira is, because she's a cleric and druid, she's a healer, and that's a good thing, because Brianna gets hurt, and it's nice having a healer. And Brianna is calling the shots in this campaign. So Valspira is sort of not a sidekick as such, but a supporting character. And that's how we get around this about me being alone. And we also have, both my sons have characters in this campaign, and they've both been playing with us. So I can't remember the name of my oldest son's character. He's a rogue. And my youngest is also a half-orc. He's a half-orc fighter with the name Thok. And he pops up now and then, and We just write him out of the story when he's not here, and then we suddenly bump into him when he's here visiting. So that's kind of fun. And because Hubby always knows when he's going to come here, he sits down and gets a side quest or something ready for him to join me in. Because there's an overarching story here. And we started Brianna's backstory. If you're familiar with Critical Role, and if you've seen the animated series, if you've seen season 2, you know about the Chroma Conclave. And you also know that people, there were a lot of fugitives from the villages. And Brianna's father, I almost said my father, Brianna's father escaped from Vestron to Whitestone during the Chroma Conclave, met Brianna's mother, who's a human, and the rest is history. And when Brianna was about 2 years old, he went back to Vestron to help them rebuild the town, and he vanished. And Brianna was a soldier in the Pale Guard in Whitestone, and she got she asked for leave indefinitely to find her father. And that's where the whole campaign started. And she bumped into Valspira in Whitestone. And Brianna found her father, but things kept happening. So that ended up just being sort of a prologue. Now the whole continent is at war. So still things to figure out.
Yeah, as we left off the last thing, we were heading towards Druid Circle, just south of Byron. For those who are deep in the lore,
Byron is the town Vax and Vex from Campaign 1 were born.
and
That's where their mother lived, and that's where their father came to get them when they wanted them to move with him to Singorn.
it's also the hometown of another character from Critical Role.
EXU,
Yeah.
Opal, was from Byron, if you've seen EXU. By the way, characters from EXU is sort of a side campaign or a spin-off of sorts, where Matthew Mercer were one of the players, and a lady named Abria Iangar was the DM, and he played a dwarf sorcerer named Dariax, and he's also been in this campaign as an NPC. I think he was the first quest Brianna and Valspira went on was with Dariax.
Yeah.
And Opal is with us at the moment.
Yeah, and you guys seem to be heading into trouble.
Yep.
Moving towards Druid Circle, which Keyleth is supposed to.
The last
close.
thing that happened was that Keyleth threw up a shield, and then Hubby said, "And we're done." So when we start up again, we're standing behind the shield that Keyleth has conjured up, and we're not sure what is attacking us. So that's where we are now. So I don't know what's going to happen next, because that's his business. That's what he knows. So you can't say anything?
There will be death.
Yeah.
Just a matter of who will be dying, if it will be one of our characters or if it will be the enemies.
I think I'm juggling 3 different characters, but they're not twins, but they're siblings. There's a ranger called Elnarin. He's a half-elf, and his sister is called Elwyn, and she's a warlock. And I've had those. It's a lot of work keeping track of 3 different characters, especially in combat. And when 2 of them are casters, because Brianna because she's taking levels in Paladin, she has some spells as well. And Elvin is a warlock. They don't have a lot of spells, but she has some spells. So it takes a bit of the fun out of it for me, because I have to do a lot of math and I have to keep thinking about what to do next all the time. But I have those in my back pocket, so I can take. And if Brianna should die, you always should have a backup character in Dungeons and Dragons, because we don't. If you have revival spells, you can keep people back up, but we don't have a cleric with revival spells in our party. So I think Elwyn is my top choice for my backup. The half-elf warlock. She's kind of cool. So I think she's going to be my backup character if Brianna dies. But
We do have a cleric. Val is a cleric as well.
but do we have a diamond? You need a diamond worth 500 gold.
I know you should have one in your inventory.
By the way, Brianna has a bag of holding. And for those of you who are familiar with my yarn dyeing business, I have a colorway called Bente's bag of holding. Like that. This episode is going to end up on that playlist. But the colorway that was called Bente's bag of holding has now changed name to Brianna's bag of holding, because that only made sense because I think it flows better as well. So Brianna's bag of holding. It's the exact same colorway, just has a new name. And yesterday I actually made a colorway called Prospero the Void as well. So it's sort of a rabbit hole, this. And I keep buying new dice. So I'm what they call the dice goblin, because I love dice. Not that I get any more D20s or natural 20s, even though I have lots of dice. So I'm not sure what more we could say about the campaign.
Probably not a lot. Could perhaps talk about some of the more traumatic incidents.
What's happened
The arcs.
until now. The arcs, I can show you this. This is what's happened so far in a book. And I jot down notes when we play, and then I put them in here with a bit nicer handwriting. And so this is sort of what's happened so far. And it's sort of been a journey, both on paper and not in real life, of course, because this is fantasy. But we can't start with the beginning and tell you what's happened so far, because we've been playing for some hours.
I guess we can talk about what's the most challenging parts about playing D&D. And for me, the most challenging part is trying to avoid any type of metagaming. It's often a challenge. Not as much as a DM, but I remember back to our first live campaign, which was back in 16 or 17 or something like that.
Yeah.
With a group of friends here in STOKMARKNES. The metagaming part was very difficult to get rid of as a newbie. Trying to stay in character, trying to play and make the decisions that your character would make based on the alignment and the background.
So, for those of you who don't know, metagaming is when your character does things that your character shouldn't do, or you know things that your character doesn't know, and you try not to let that influence your character. So that's called metagaming. When you're talking across the table, you should do this because of You can't do that when you play Dungeons and Dragons. You have to. We solved that in our first campaign by talking in English. When our characters spoke, we spoke in English, and when we spoke across the table, we spoke in Norwegian. And we did that to sort of. It might sound strange, but we did it like that because we wanted to. It was a good way of separating between our characters and players. So that's one way of doing it. Or you can, and another thing, when you new to Dungeons and Dragons, it's sort of a hurdle to come across to role play, because that's scary, especially when you're playing with people you don't know. I knew my coworker, and I sort of knew her roommate, but not the other people in that campaign. So it's the role-playing bit is a bit scary, because we all played pretend when we were children, and we had no problem role-playing back then. So you have to get back into that, I think. It's not as scary when it's me and Hubby.
I remember from that first campaign, one of my biggest problems, is that I have, if I grew up 10 years later, if I was born 10 years later than I was, then I probably would have been diagnosed with some kind of ADHD. You wouldn't know it by being with me, because I seem like a very balanced and very
Unless you are road rage, anyone?
Yeah, but I'm usually quite a low energy person, but I am very easily bored, and that's one of my biggest problems with tabletop RPGs, is that my mind continues to work between the rounds. And often if you play in a party of 4 or 5 PCs, then there could be some space in between your decision making. And if I get too bored, I tend to move away from, for instance, alignment or background. So, for instance, in the first campaign we played, I think I was chaotic neutral, but I behaved like I was evil, truly evil. Especially what I like to do things with the recently deceased.
You kept licking your sword.
Yeah, so I displayed quite strange behavior compared to what was my original alignment. So the DM tried to give me this small hints that tone it down, please.
And one of the things I have problems with, because that's one of the reasons I'm really bad at, let's say, bridge, chess. I'm talking about the card game bridge. And chess is, I struggle when I have to plan things really far ahead in time. And when you're 5 player characters in combat, and you might have this wonderful idea, even put down notes, that's what I'm going to do when it becomes my turn again. The problem is, when it's your turn again, things might have changed. The baddie you were planning this really cool attack on might be dead. Some of the other players may have moved around, and then suddenly you have to think, you have to do something completely different. So I quickly understood that there's no point in basically starting to plan ahead for your next turn, because so you have to train yourself in being good at, I think it's called thinking on your feet. And that's the combat is much more engaging when I'm the only person. Hobby is kind of busy sometimes if we have NPCs fighting, because he has to fight for the baddie as well, and he has to keep a track on some of the other characters. But sometimes in combat, I control 2 characters, myself plus another character. Elwyn and Ellerin, the half-elf siblings I was talking about, I control those in combat. But sometimes it's just me and Val. At the beginning, there were only the 2 of us. And then now we have me, Val, Keelith from campaign 1. She's with us. Orin from campaign 3 is with us, and Opal from EXU. So we are 5 people now, and 3 of them is controlled by hubby, plus the bad guys. So, or 4 of them are controlled by hubby.
Yeah. What I often do is I often go for the group initiative type of solution to that problem. So they have, for instance, usually we meet 4 or 5 or 6 baddies, as you call it.
Yep.
As you call them, and you often have one kind of stronger, higher level leader type baddie, and then you have his foot soldiers or their foot soldiers to a certain extent, and they do get common initiative, meaning I just roll for them as a group, and the leader perhaps one initiative, and then the group of that is another initiative. So the order doesn't become too disjointed, because if I'm going to have your one first PC first, and then one of the baddie, and then my PC, and then one of the baddie, and
another
the baddie,
thing is,
etc.
and another thing is the entourage, if you will, for the main baddie. They often have much less amount of health of HP or health points, so they're easier to kill. So if they should have, a hobby would have to do a lot of rearranging in the initiative. But if they have, they're just going to be fewer of them as we get rid of them, to put it like that. Because HP is HP is and AC is how much.
That's the armor class.
It's the armor class. So it's how
easy they are to hit. More or less.
Yeah, how easy you are to hit, and HP is how much health you have, and both of these increase as you level up. I don't remember at the top of my head what my AC is now.
The AC depends on your dexterity mostly.
Yeah,
so if you level up on dexterity, then of course it will increase in time.
Because that simply means that you're good at dodging. So you don't have to have a lot of armor to have a high AC if you're good at dodging. Good example, rogues. They're notoriously hard to hit because they're really good at slipping away. And I have a cat that really wants me to... Yeah.
Me now.
Yeah.
No, but you're touching on some of the more difficult aspects of being a DM, and that is, making things balanced. Because if I make it too easy for you, it will not be very fruitful to play. If it gets too difficult and you're more or less killed unless I fudge, then that's also not sustainable if we want to have a campaign going on over more than just one evening. So that's the main difficulty facing any DM, is to make it balanced enough and interesting enough. And there should always be a risk. Players should always feel a risk of dying, because if there's no risk, then it's a sandbox game.
So it's sort of finding the perfect balance between it being too easy, so that we almost never get hurt, and the risk of what's called a TPK, which is a total party kill. So if he comes up with an enemy that's too powerful for our party. And when he's talking about fudging, that simply means that the DM can be nice to his party. If the DM, for example, the baddie rolls a natural 20, which doubles the damage, then the DM can just say that he rolled a 19 instead, to be nice. That's called fudging. Some DMs roll their dice in front of the DM screen, just to make sure that people know they're not fudging. But I think it's acceptable. I think people don't see it as cheating when the DM is fudging, because the DM's job is to make it fun and interesting and engaging to play, and he doesn't want to kill the party. So sometimes I think the DM fudges because he doesn't want to ruin it.
But this is exactly why you have session 0. So whenever you are going to start a new campaign with a group of players, you should have a session 0 where you talk about your expectations, where all the expectations of the players are been put on a table for discussion. So the DM knows whether the players are expecting a kill box kind of campaign where there's going to be a lot of death and a high risk, or whether they want it to become a more long-running campaign.
Or a role-play heavy campaign where you don't have to have fights all the time, but you, for some, I think it's a fun expression they call them murder hobos, and that's the campaign where all you do is killing people and monsters and looting and finding gold and magic items, and then you go on to the next village and kill some baddie and loot some more. So that's not the style I prefer. I love a bit of roleplay, but if it gets too roleplay heavy, it's sort of boring that as well. So the best, I love doing combat, but
I think we both like a more linear kind of campaign where you have these kind of yardsticks we're trying to meet, and a certain kind of development that we want to achieve.
And we use milestone leveling, by the way. There's 2 ways of doing that. You can allot experience points, XP, like you do in computer games. And then when you meet a certain XP, my mobile phone is talking to us. And when you reach a certain level of XP, you level up. Or you can do what we do, and that's milestones. And that's Hobby just decides when they beat this baddie or when they reach this point in the story, they level up. And the good thing about that is that if we sort of, because if you play with the XP, then you meet, and the DM knows that in this dungeon they're going to meet, let's say, a beholder, and he can then decide that, okay, we're leveling them up first. And he can use that as a milestone.
Could also be, for instance, for you as a fighter / paladin, it could be that there's a significant event tied up to your class that automatically makes it easier to say that this is the point where you're leveled up. It might be that you have won a fierce battle as a fighter, or you have been training with a more experienced battle master, and hence learning the ropes as a fighter.
That's how we did it when I multi-classed as well, and how I reached the levels in Paladin, because I started as a fighter, and after playing for a bit, I sort of wanted to have a religious experience, so I can take some levels in Paladin, and I told my husband about that, and then he suddenly, the next time we were playing, suddenly Brianna started having visions in her dreams. So then he started giving me visions, or not me, but Brianna, and I was thrilled because I knew this means he's starting to lead Brianna into the... And the deity, I had a say in that. I wanted to serve Melora, or the Wild Mother. So I started, I needed more levels in Charisma to become a Paladin. So you solved that by me finding a magic item that increased my Charisma by 1. And then I suddenly reached the magical number of 13, and that's what I needed.
Yeah, but you also did a couple of quests that were more on the charisma positive sides. If you manage to complete those kind of quests,
I got that as a bonus once.
Homebrew up your charisma that way as well.
After I did that successfully, I think it was successfully, I made someone, I told the ghost to go towards the light or something. And after that, I got, the prize was I could put up my charisma by 1. This is Homebrew. This, you can't do that in Dungeons and Dragons, but this is our game. We're doing it Homebrew, and sue me. The main thing is we're having fun with it. And The cat, Severus Snape, the cat, he normally never is on this table, but as soon if I sit down and record my podcast, he does this.
When we play the campaigns, he often does it.
He's normally just lies down on top of the map
Mm-hmm.
or in the dice tray, and now he's lying in the dice tray. So,
I think he's telling us something to expedite whatever we are doing.
So, if we're going to go quickly through what we done so far, Brianna found her father in a town called Stilben. That's the town campaign 1 started in.
And the happy reunion lasted for 5 minutes, and then everything went.
Yeah, and then Stilben was attacked by an army of Drow, dark elves. And the last time I saw my father, he was in Imon, which is the capital of Tal'Dorei, with my mother, because we managed to reunite them as well. So that arc of the campaign is finished now. They are happy reunited in Imon, and of course there's a war on, because when I found my father, Hubby had to come up with something else. And what we're now doing, we are moving around from, there are, I think you said there were 4 Druid Circles.
I think there are 5 that you know of.
And Keyleth is supposed to go to each and every one of those and plant a seed. And that's what we're doing now. And the good thing about having Keyleth on our team now is that Keyleth has this spell called Travel via Plants or something. I think that's what it's called. She can just make a portal in a tree trunk and then come out of a tree in a totally different place. The only thing is she has to know that tree. She has to know what it looks like. And because we have her, we could easily just, a journey that would take a couple of days takes a second. So that's the good thing about having Keyleth on our team, especially now that we're going to jump around to 5 different locations on the continent. I think all of them are on the continent of Tal'Dorei, so we haven't moved away from Tal'Dorei yet. But that's up to the DM, I guess.
Keely hasn't fully explained just now, at this stage, why we're doing the things we're doing with the Druid Circles. The only thing she said is that she and the de facto leadership of Tal'Dorei suspects that the invading forces are using these Druid Circles to mass transport their armies or troops. So she's planting seeds in order for the cousins of the Sun Tree to grow instantly and more or less destroy these circles.
And the Sun Tree is central for Whitestone. It's a tree in the center of the town of Whitestone. Some of you have lost the plot a long time ago, but I guess then you stopped watching it as well. And for those of you who are critters, you know exactly what we're talking about.
If you guys have more questions related to what we've been talking about, then leave a comment and we'll get back in a follow-up video.
And we'll do another one of these if you have questions. This is the sort of thing that can either be either we could finish it here or we could sit here for another couple of hours. Epilogue lady here, and we have a lot of stuff has happened in the campaign. Again, if you have any questions and anything you want to, any comments about this Dungeons and Dragons stuff, put it down below, and we might do another episode answering your questions. And I think I'm going to let Hubby do something else now. Mm-hmm. And I'm recording my podcast tomorrow, so you've already seen that because this is not going up until next week. So anyways, I'll see you when I see you. Goodbye.
Me trying to smile.